This part of the garden has a major problem, and that is that it's actually missing the garden. I've been prepping this area for a very long time now, and the day has finally come where I'm going to sketch this out, put the beds in, fill them, and show you exactly the whole process from start to finish. Now, there are a couple things that will be changing. First of all, I will be getting rid of this fabric bed here. I just want something more permanent, long-lasting. So this is going to go, but I will reuse the soil. And then the up front here is the L bed. That is the only bed that's going to be staying here, and it's going to serve as our anchor point. So the next thing we need to do is take our handy clipboard, which is a plank with a binder clip on it, and a measuring tape, and we're going to stake this area out and do a rough layout so I know exactly how many beds I need, what size I want them at, and how much soil I need to order. Now I need to figure out the dimensions over here and take a couple quick measurements. First is from that garden bed to the wall, which should be about 7 feet. And it is just about 7 feet, so that's good to know. Then I want to measure the distance from this bed to the wall. And even though I am removing this, I am going to be using it as a reference point, so that's fine. 16, actually just about 18 inches, so 1.5 feet from the wall. And then now, the final one that I need to tie this up is the distance from this bed to the end of the square bed over here. All right, so what I'm going to do is continue the line for that garden bed out at 7 feet. Then I'm going to account for this gap here, which is hair over 5 feet, it's 5.5 feet. The end of the bed is just over 9 feet. And then I have a 1.5 foot gap right there, and it's a 4 foot bed. And now what's interesting here is that at this point, there's just an old garden barrier that just kind of has always existed here. So what I'm going to do next is actually measure the distance of that barrier to the wall. And this will probably be a new reference line, I'm guessing at about 8 feet. All right, yeah, it's actually exactly at 8 feet on the outer edge here. I don't need to keep this in place, I might remove it, but I'm going to assume that any point on from here is going to be 8 foot of space on this side, which actually frees up quite a lot in terms of different size beds. So now the thing to do is measure from this fabric bed to the end, or at least as far as I want to go. Right over here in this pit of despair is the most insane plant that I've ever had to deal with. There's almost 0% chance I'm going to get rid of it. So I don't really actually want to encroach too deep into this area, but I do want to actually record it. So right there is 24 feet, which is good because there's only 1 foot left on the tape measure. And then realistically, where I want to stop the garden itself is probably going to be, let's say at 18 feet. At this point, I know that that insane plant shouldn't be too bad and it won't get into my beds. So now let's add that to the chart. So we need to go 18 feet from this square bed. So each square is 5. So that's 5, 10, 15, 16, 17 and a half, because that is a half distance right here. So this is the idealized end of the garden. And then I have another 6 feet from that point to continue technically working with if I could solve that insane weed. So that's going to be another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to just call it 6 and not go any half distance. So right here, this is the area of space that we have to work with, not including that one since we're getting rid of it. This is actually quite a lot of square footage to deal with. So now I'm probably going to transfer this into an Excel sheet so I could play with different shapes and sizes, and we'll go from there. Instead of showing you guys every single measurement out there that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, I have it all recorded right here. And instead, I made a spreadsheet I'll include in the description for you guys, where I made a Google Sheet that has every single square the exact same size. So you could pretend like every square is exactly 1 foot. So now what I'm going to do is draw in the dimensions of the garden. The bound points are the most important kind of things to figure out how many beds you need and where to place everything. So I know, for example, that the garden can only go 7 feet out from the wall. So what I'm going to do is draw a solid border line at 7 feet. So I know that that is my boundary where I cannot go past. So now I have a line at 7. And the next thing I want to do is enter the anchor points. So I measured that L-shaped bed. It's the only bed that's going to be staying there and is already there. So it's a perfect reference point to base the rest of the garden off of. What I'm going to do is select a 5-column cell and change that to the color green. That bed is 5 feet by 5 feet on the L-shape actual dimensions. So that is why I'm going to make it 5 by 5. And just shading the cells in green like this is a perfect way of representing the bed. The next one is going to be very close to it, up against the wall. Now, I wouldn't recommend generally ever putting a bed up against the wall, but in this case, I know I could handle it. They're short beds, they're not that big, so it's easy for me to work around them and access them, and that's why I'm going with it. But every other bed that I'm going to be putting in is going to be 2 feet apart from the next bed and 2 feet away from the wall behind it. So that way there's easy access across the entire bed from any point. So these are the first 2 beds. The one that I'm putting in here, I've already decided is a 4x3 by 15 inch. So it's going to be the shorter beds. And now I'm gonna, like I said, go 2 feet away from that bed, 2 feet away from the wall. And that is going to be where I put my next bed, which will be a 4x4, 30-inch tall bed. I want a tall bed. Actually, I want 2 tall beds because we're going to be running a little experiment in them. So they have to be the same, and I want them both to be tall. So they're going to be 4x4 by 30, and you'll see that experiment in a moment here when we set up the actual beds. And after that, the last bed that I'm going to fit in for now is a 4x8 bed. This will be a nice big bed. I'm going to keep it short at 15 inches, so I could plant stuff like tomatoes in it and make it easy to trellis up. And there we go. So now I have all my beds in. I'm going to label them very quickly. So the way I did this whole design is I went to the Epic Gardening website, and then I clicked on products and went to Birdie's Metal Raised Beds. And that is where I viewed through all the different options we have. And I decided that I'm going to be using original 6-in-1s, tall 8-in-1s, and a original 8-in-1. So the original 6-in-1 configuration is going to be configuration 1. So if I scroll down, you'll see all the possible layouts. You could click through them, see what the size is and how much soil they take and what parts you use. But I'm going with 1, which is roughly in that 4x3 range that I talked about. And the soil volume is 15. So now what I'm going to do is go through, add in all the soil volumes for each bed. The tall 8-in-1 in a square configuration takes 44. So that's a pretty hefty amount of soil. So 44, another 44. And then the original 8-in-1 in the 4x8 configuration is roughly 30. So I already did this math, and I know that it's exactly 133 cubic feet. Now, 133 cubic feet is useful, but usually when you order bulk soil, it's by the yard. So what I'm going to do is divide that by 27, and that'll tell me exactly how many yards of soil I need, which is 4.9, or let's say 5 cubic yards. Now, I like to order a little extra soil. Something like 6 cubic yards will probably be ideal. That'll give me some extra soil to fill grow bags, give me extra soil to top off beds like this herb bed that's settled quite a bit. And that's about it. If you need to find a bulk soil supplier, call your local nursery, ask them if they have any leads. They might even sell bulk soil, or there might be some private company that delivers bulk soil to your area. So we know the beds we need. I already built them. I just went ahead and assembled them beforehand. Now all we need to do is go out there in the garden, lay them all out, get our soil in, get our irrigation in, and show you how I actually mend the soil, because raised bed soil can be a little bit tricky, and I like to give my plants the best possible option. So let's go over to the garden and set this entire thing up. So I have Paul here helping me out because we do have a lot of soil to move, and he likes to dig. So we should be good for that. Now we are starting back here on the L-shaped bed. And the reason for that is that this bed is already in place. So it's an anchor point to build out the rest of this garden. It makes the most sense to start from a permanent position rather than start from over there to try to perfectly meet this side. The other thing is that we are going to be moving all that soil out of that bed anyway, so we might as well work our way down. Now over here, we do have a slope. What we are going to do here is just kind of cut in this side of the hill here, level the bed out. It's gonna drop down a little bit and create a little bit of a drop, then lift to the tall beds all the way down. All right, now that we have this perfectly leveled, we are going to transfer all the soil out of this bed into here, and then whatever's left over we'll put into the next bed. But first I gotta pull out all these artichokes and take a look at the root system on these perennial artichokes. So this is something I could definitely transplant somewhere else and will regrow. So I might as well save them because they are quite mature plants. All right, so we're getting pretty close to filling that. And I did just re-level it with the soil, and I think it actually does look better. This backside might be a little bit low, but we'll figure it out. We got most of the soil out of here, so I think what I'd like to do is just try to drag this bed out, get it out of the way, place the new Birdie's bed in its place, and then we'll backfill it to get this out of the way. This has been in the garden for over a year now. Zero damage. The roots did not really make it through. The liner has held up, so honestly not a bad bed. I just wanted something permanent, so we're going with the Birdies. So now all the beds are in. The next thing we need to do is actually drop in the PVC pipe and actually pipe into the beds. Before filling it with soil, it's going to be much easier if we can get all this irrigation installed. And also, I still haven't got a call from that soil delivery, so Might as well get some irrigation in. First thing I'm doing here is cutting off the line that I set up on my irrigation. So I am going to adapt it all to 1/2 inch PVC, not because of any particular reason except that I just happen to have a lot of leftover 1/2 inch PVC. So every connection is going to get primed, then it's going to get glued, and we'll work our way through over to the raised beds. We're nearing the end of the day and we're definitely not even close to done here, but we do have the irrigation done. So this obviously took longer than I expected, as it always does. So if you come look over here, the general strategy for every single one of these beds is, first of all, I'm running the irrigation line up against the wall here, very shallow. It's never going to be pressurized all the time, only pressurized when the irrigation's running. So I'm not worried about leaks or anything like that. Now, the reason why I'm coming in from the corner like this is that what happens is I have to deal with the curve of this bed a little bit. So I want to come in from the top, elbow, and then I'll run my poly line here, pull a manifold that will run drip lines all the way down to the end of the bed. It's day 2 and we're going to finish filling up all these beds, but I forgot to mention the experiment that I'm going to be running. These are both the exact same beds, 4x4, 30 inches high. This bed over here is going to be filled with soil from the start and only soil. This one I'm going to do using a semi-hugelkultur method and fill the base with logs. Now, the idea behind putting logs in the bottom of your bed is that you use less soil. Personally, I think it's not really worth it when you could order soil in bulk. You're already saving so much money by ordering it this way. But there are some other advantages of adding logs to your bed. One of which is that as they decay, they will form a sort of fungal network. So I have an old piece of wood here, and this is one that's just been aging for a while. And all this white stuff in there is basically just fungal networks. So eventually they will sort of decompose, get kind of spongy, retain some water, and probably add some fungal life. So there might be some net positive to that, but in exchange, this bed will settle a lot as that wood breaks down. So there's a trade-off to everything. I personally think that I like this method more, but now I finally get the chance to test it with 2 identical beds. So I'm gonna add the rest of these logs down here, and then we're gonna go fill up these beds and mulch this entire garden. So I ordered soil from a local place called San Pasquale Valley Soils. The cost of this raised bed mix, $44 a cubic yard. The delivery was the most expensive part. It was $200 about. So I got 6 yards. If I add the cost of delivery, each yard is roughly $70. What that means, basically, just to not try to overwhelm you with math, is that I'm paying anywhere from $2 to $4 to an equivalent bag of soil you would buy at the store. So this is by far cheaper than anything you could possibly get, and the quality is much better. Now, when it comes to actually moving this soil from here back into my yard, we're using a combination of gorilla carts and wheelbarrows. And one of the best tools is actually a manure or hay fork. You could get into anywhere on the pile like this. It won't really drop much. Then you move it over and place it in. Another great tool that I like to use is a snow shovel. Now, obviously in San Diego it doesn't snow, but I do order a lot of soil. The nice thing about this is that you could come in low at the base of your pile, like that, and you get a pretty good scoop every single time. It just doesn't work well when you get up here. It's actually, that worked pretty well, but in general, it's a little bit better to use the fork up there and the shovel at the base. Now we gotta finish filling these beds. I'm gonna load up this cart and we'll get back to filling. As discussed, we did add some more logs and wood chips, so this is now a very properly woody bed. Luckily, it's very deep, so we're not gonna run into any issues with burying wood in the soil. But if you do this, you wanna make sure you get a hose and you sort of blast through all this material. And what this does is it helps the soil settle down into all the little cracks and holes that you created by laying out all these logs and wood chips. So as we fill this with soil, I'm gonna periodically come through, go like this, and make sure that that soil is actually working its way down to the base of the bed. Before we finish actually topping these beds off, I will choose to amend it. This is optional depending on the soil you're getting and just your personal preference. I know for a fact that the manufacturer of this raised bed soil tells you that there is basically no nitrogen present in the soil. That's maybe a little bit weird sounding, but totally fine if you know that up front. So what they recommend is that you use something like a feather meal for a quick release of nitrogen for whatever you're planting. But I will be doing that. But first, before I do that, I'm going to amend the bulk of the soil with a organic slow release fertilizer like this Espoma Plant Tone. This is 533, so quite a balanced mix. And all I'm going to do is just take a pretty decent shovelful here and just spread it across the top. So that's going to be amendment number 1. I'm gonna just try to get a good coverage across the entire bed, over here as well, under this bag. So that's the first step. The next thing I'm going to be adding is volcanic rock dust. It's also normally called azomite. Basically, it's just a very finely pulverized volcanic mineral. So as you can see, it has this kind of almost pinkish tone to it. And this is going to contain a little bit of macronutrients, but mostly micronutrients. All these little elements that plants need to thrive is going to be in here. So for example, if you're growing beets, you can't grow beets without boron. This will have some boron present. Not to just get too complicated about it, but the main reason I actually grow this is that I want to make sure that all of my plants have access to all the minerals that they could possibly need, because what that means is that those minerals will get into your vegetables and produce and improve your overall health of your plants. Not only the overall health of your plants, but you'll now also be consuming some of these minerals and elements that otherwise might be missing from your vegetables. So that's the reason why I always like to put this across my entire garden, but definitely in a raised bed that's not actually part of the earth and has a bunch of minerals. The last thing I'm going to add is actually some extra pumice. Pumice adds aeration and drainage, and when you have a tall 30-inch bed like this, it just gets a little bit trickier to make sure that you have good water flow all the way to the bottom, that you have enough oxygen. So every single one of these beds, I'm going to be adding a half bag of pumice. And the reason I went with pumice over perlite is that pumice is a little bit heavier. It will actually stay in the soil, whereas something like a perlite will actually just rise to the top every time you water. It can be really frustrating. So I like to go with pumice for that reason, and also the reason that it doesn't have a bunch of cancerous dust that you have to breathe. So another great reason. What we're going to do now that I have the base amendments in is take a power planter like this and just basically mix it in as much as I can. This is just to make sure that I have a good mix of these minerals and amendments throughout the entire soil column. And then we'll come back, top it off, and I'll add one more amendment that will guarantee everything grows well. Just do a little bit more manual mixing here to make sure that everything is distributed well, and we'll go ahead and top it off. Before we finish amending the rest of the beds, we have to finish this one. And the final ingredient that we're putting is feather meal. This is an organic, high nitrogen, quick release sort of fertilizer. So 1200, and based on the application rates, it says that I need about 2 cups for this size bed. So I have this outdoor measuring cup. Don't worry, this isn't the one that I use for cooking. That's 2 cups. And the idea behind this is that this fast release of nitrogen will make sure that whatever I plant in here won't be stunted by lack of nitrogen. Because as I said, this soil is known to not have any nitrogen present. So this will guarantee that that first crop does really well, and all the other like slow release fertilizer we added earlier will guarantee that the future plants and also the roots as they go down can also get access to that nitrogen as they continue to grow. So I'm just going to lightly scratch it into the surface without trying to mix it too much, because I don't want to actually disturb the distribution. And that's it. This bed, I will probably give at least 2 to 3 days just to allow the soil to settle a little bit before topping it off and then planting in it. Even when you are using pure soil like this, the soil will tend to settle a little bit, and you don't want to plant into it right away because the plants are just not going to be happy if their roots settle by a couple inches after you just put them in. The other factor that you should always check is to make sure that your soil isn't physically hot. This soil is kind of hot because it is actually made out of a cow manure. So that breakdown process just produces a lot of heat similar to compost. So make sure it's not hot and allow at least 2 to 3 days for the soil to settle before you plant into it. So I'm gonna mix this in and we'll get the rest of the beds amended, and we'll talk about the next step. All the beds have been amended, and right now I'm just flushing these irrigation lines to make sure that there's no sediment trapped in them. This ensures that when I install the drip irrigation, it's basically not going to all get clogged immediately. So now what we need to do is add the mulch to the rest of this area, and then I'll tell you exactly how I plan to use every single one of these beds. The first layer of mulch is now down. I got everything wet so that all the dust has settled and everything is just looking so good. I'm so excited to see this build come together. This first bed, the lower one, is definitely going to be growing tomatoes in the springtime, but right now I'm probably going to fill it with cauliflower and broccoli just to get that soil started with something. These tall beds are going to be a lot of fun just because I like the idea of having experiments in the garden. This is the one that has a lot of wood chips and logs, the more hugelkultur style, and this one is straight soil. I'd love to hear you guys' predictions on which one you think will do better. I am not entirely sure which one I'm going to end up liking more. Now, there is that tiny bed in the back. I'm thinking I'll probably put at least a few flowers in here just to help bring a little bit more pollinator action to this back section. But that's it. The soil is still about 120 degrees, so it's too hot to plant in now. It's because it has a lot of manure compost blended in. So I'm gonna give it about a week for the temps to drop, the soil to settle, and I might do a little top off layer and then I'm really gonna get planted in here. And I can't wait to see how much food I could get out of this new area. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.